Good evening. We're going to go ahead and get the webinar started. It's 9:00 p.m. by my clock here in Western New York in the Eastern Time Zone. And I want to, first of all, thank all of you for being here tonight. And I know we will be having people continue to join us as time goes on. A couple of housekeeping. First of all, I'm Reverend Sandy Hasnauer. I'm the Associate Executive Director of American Baptist Women's Ministries, and I'm the moderator for tonight's webinar. And I'm very excited about tonight. It's been in the planning for some time, and I'm really looking forward to finally getting to this moment and being able to start it. I do have a couple of housekeeping things to tell you about before we turn things over to our guest speaker for the evening. First of all, everybody, when you come in the call, you are automatically muted. And that is so that we can make sure we have the best sound quality possible from our speaker. If you have questions during the webinar itself, during the presentation, you can use the question box in your control panel. Just type in your question there and I will see it. It is possible that a question you're answering we know will get answered or will at least be covered later in the webinar, in which case I'll respond that to you. But those questions don't disappear. So I will make sure I keep track of those, and when we get to Q&A, if we haven't already had an opportunity to ask your question, I can make sure it gets asked there. The other way that you can ask questions is when we get to the Q&A time. You have a little hand icon on your control panel. If you click that, it's the same as if you were raising your hand in class, and that lets me know that you've got a question. When we get to the Q&A time, I will then invite one of you who has your hand raised to speak, and then you can ask your question directly. So those are the two ways that you will be able to ask questions throughout this webinar. I would like to thank our guest speaker for this evening, Anya Narori. She is the Project Director for Ministers and Missionaries Benefit Board. I hope you have had the opportunity to read her bio on our website. If not, make sure you do so afterwards. She is really well experienced to cover this topic with us tonight, managing debt effectively. So with no further ado, I would like to turn things over to Anya. Anya, I'm going to go ahead and give you presenter controls now.
Thank you so much, Sandy. Hello, everyone. I am so excited to be here with all of you this evening. I think that it's definitely, like Sandy said, some time coming, and I'm very excited to have prepared and now have the opportunity to be speaking with you right now. So I am from MMBB, and before I introduce myself, I would like to share with you who we are and also the vision statement that our CEO has given us, Mr. Louis P. Barberin. So MMBB is financial services will be a premier Christian financial services ministry to the free church community, providing comprehensive financial solutions for its members and their families during their journey to and through retirement. So that gives you an idea of who we are and what we really strive to do. And now let me just go ahead and briefly introduce myself. I am Anya Narori, and I have a master's degree in business administration with a concentration in finance, and a bachelor's of science in business administration with a concentration in marketing. And I also hold a certificate in Christian ministry. I've worked at some of the major investment banks over the years of my career, and I am definitely so delighted to be serving as a Lily Project Director at MMBB, where I have been able to really integrate my financial education and experience with Christian ministry, which was definitely always a big goal of mine. And I am married to Reverend Santiago Narori. He's the pastor of First Baptist Church of Laurelton, located in Brick, New Jersey. Yes, that's here down in the Jersey Shore, and that's also where I actually have the pleasure of serving as multimedia director. Now that I have had the opportunity to briefly introduce myself, let's get onto the topic. So managing debt effectively. It's definitely a topic that I feel very, very passionate about, because I can definitely speak to it from a place of experience myself. The concepts and principles that I will be sharing with you tonight are things that I have applied to my own life, and they are things that I can definitely say, hey, they do actually work. But before we get started, I want to read to you Romans 13:7. And it says, give to everyone what you owe them. If you owe taxes, pay taxes. If revenue, then revenue. If respect, then respect. If honor, then honor. So what will we actually be discussing this evening? We will actually be finding out why should we even consider debt in the first place? When we do consider debt, what are some of the things that we should keep in mind as we make the decision to or not to get into debt? What is consumer debt itself? Why is it that using credit creates even more debt? We're going to be looking into credit scores, who reports on them, what actually is taken into consideration when these companies actually spit out those credit scores for us, or the credit reports. How do creditors really decide whether to grant us credit or not? We're also going to be talking about some general guidelines in terms of debt management ratios, and then we're going to get into it on how we actually go ahead and start a plan to pay off debt. And that's in the end that debt management plan that we're all striving to get ahead of and manage our debt effectively. And I'm going to give you practical steps one by one as to what you need to do in order to get started. So let's start with why debt. Why should we even consider debt? Well, a lot of people actually do incorporate some of their spending on a budget, and they save up for different items, but there are some items that are way too large in some cases for us to endure just on plain savings. And so we take advantage of the tool of being able to get credit for these large purchases. For example, buying a home by way of a mortgage payment, or funding education by way of school loans and things of that nature. Can it actually be done in cash? Yeah, of course, definitely. It's definitely not something that you could, get away from and completely say, there's no way I can actually 100% save for a home. You absolutely can, but it does take a lot of discipline. It's definitely something that requires a lot of time and a lot of dedication. So these are definitely in the cases where we look at most people actually spending that credit on. What is consumer debt? So when we speak about consumer debt, we're talking about things like credit cards, automobile loans. These things should actually be avoided. We should try to spend as much as we can on actually saving up for items that we could buy on a day-to-day basis and we would normally charge. Why? Consider, the different things that come along when you actually say, hey, you know what, I'm going to charge this amount, and the amount actually creeps up on you. And I will be speaking on that a little bit more later. But also I want you to keep in mind that while mortgage interest, for example, is deductible for income tax purposes at the end of the year, so it will give you that little bit of a tax break, interest that you're paying on consumer debt is not. So you are on your own, whether you're paying $1,000, $2,000 on that consumer debt, that is not going to give you any type of buffer in your taxes at the end of the year. However, mortgage interest would be deducted. Let's go ahead and do our first poll. And this is just one question that I would like, and I'm very interested in knowing if you all get it right, because it's definitely a very eye-opening question. What do you think is the average amount of household credit card debt? And we have a few options here, and I want you to give it your best shot.
For participants, all you need to do is click on the dot next to the answer that you think, and it will register in the poll. Okay, everybody has voted. So let me share those results. It looks like most people chose 16,000, and then 10,000 and 20,000 were tied. Nobody chose 4,000.
Well, you are, most people are absolutely right, because 16,000 is actually the amount. The average U.S. household owes $16,061 in credit card debt, and that is actually up 10% from 14,546 back in 2006, according to the different analysis that was actually performed. And consider this. Interest rates play a very large role in this debt. The average household, and I would like everybody to hold on to your seats at this moment, because the average household that owes money on credit cards pays about $1,292 in interest each year. Think about how many groceries, how many gas, tanks you could fill. And if that alone doesn't want to make you go get your credit cards right now and start cutting, I don't know what will, but definitely something that gets me excited about trying to make sure that there is definitely not $1 spent on those interest rates. Before we move forward, I do want to talk about this one thing. When you actually consider debt, and this is actually where it ties into this question, paying interest increases the cost of those items purchased. It's definitely a very tough pill to swallow when you're thinking you're getting a great deal on an item, and so you're going to the store thinking, oh, this item is at a great value, so I am going to go ahead and purchase this item. But the same concept of compounding interest that we often speak about when we think about retirement savings, that same concept applies to what we're doing paying back credit cards. And I'm going to give you some numbers now. Try to follow along. It's going to be round numbers. So $100, month number one, is your balance. So you start off with $100. You made a purchase. You're very happy with your purchase. Great deal. You're paying 10% interest on that credit card. And for you that are holding credit cards currently, you will know that 10% is actually a lot lower than what they're actually offering these days. So $100, 10% interest rate. At the end of the month, you've acquired $10 charge in interest. That will bump up your balance to $110. Well, if you don't pay that balance at month 2, your balance is actually $110, right? So you are going to be paying 10% interest charges on $110, which will then mean that you owe an additional $11 on that balance, which will give you a $121 new balance. On month number 3, your payment is up to $133.10 because of that compounding interest principle that we've just discussed. So these are things definitely that you have to keep in mind and take into consideration. Also take into consideration that periodic repayments to a lender will definitely limit your ability to use future funds in any other way that you deem appropriate. So your commitment to that lender is definitely taking away from your options of that money being available to spend it on anything else. And also, I just want to remind you to make sure that you really read and fully understand all of the terms and conditions associated with financing anything that you would like to finance, because it really will give you an understanding on really what you can and cannot afford in terms of actually financing a purchase. Now, using credit definitely creates debt, but what is it that we're talking about in terms of secured versus unsecured debt? Well, think about it this way. Secured debt basically means you're going to be purchasing something that the lender could basically take back from you if you don't make good on those payments. So for example, if you buy a home, the bank typically says, hey, you've missed your payments, we want to take possession of your home. Same with a car. Unsecured debt is typically credit card debt. Now, if you miss your credit card payments, I have yet to hear of some of the lender actually coming into your home and saying, hey, give me, the pair of pants you bought last week or the groceries that you bought last night. It does not happen. So you have to, take that into consideration. Lenders have more security with these secured debt options, the mortgage, the car loan, the things that they can kind of repossess from you and not lose as much. So the interest rates on those debts are typically a lot lower. For unsecured debt, where the risk for the lender is actually higher, the interest rate normally is a lot higher as well. And so why is it really important to, keep in mind the terms? Why are these important considerations so important, right? The amount, the term, the rate. When I'm talking about the amount, these are simple dollars. When I'm talking about term, I'm thinking, okay, what is the time frame? What time is it that I'm actually going to get involved and engaged in this agreement for this debt? And of course, at what rate am I going to have to pay back the loan? Once you consider all of this, all of these things together, you can potentially think, hey, you know what, is it really worth me getting into this debt, or can I potentially save and really incorporate into my monthly budget the amount that I would need to eventually be able to afford this as a cash purchase on its own. Now, in addition to everything that we've just discussed, I just want to also encourage you to definitely do not rely on credit cards to cover your normal living expenses. And this is something that has become overwhelmingly more and more common nowadays. It's definitely not seen as anything, out of this world to go ahead and continue to pay your normal living expenses on credit cards. This is something that could potentially work in your favor only if you are really disciplined and you really know what you're doing with your budget. So if you have established spending limits that you cannot go beyond, it's typically a very good idea to, of course, take advantage of those incentives that credit cards offer, the points and the perks and all of the things that are available to you. But keep in mind, statistically, when you swipe that credit card and you've become so desensitized to the actual cash leaving your hand, your hard-earned money leaving your hand and going into somebody else's possession, it's a lot easier for us to just go ahead and charge again and charge again. So since we experience that type of break and we don't feel that pain, we are more likely to spend. But not to say that if you do have a good grasp on what you're doing, it's definitely advantageous to take advantage of the incentives and the different perks that are available to you. If you do that, you need to make sure that you pay your credit cards every single month. This way, you get the advantages and you do not pay a cent in interest, which is, what we're all after. Just paying for what we need, not paying for their, business model to succeed. Remember, these are business entities that are relying on that type of business model. They're getting interest from you, and they're relying on the idea that, hey, you are going to charge, you're going to go overboard, and then you're going to be left paying us the bill. Another question for you that will go into the poll: what type of purchases are credit cards most commonly used to finance? And this is definitely very eye-opening for me, and I'm very interested to hear what you guys think.
Okay, we have about 25% of you have voted, 50 of you. I'm going to give it another few seconds. Let's see if we can bump it up to 100%.
I believe in you. You can do it. There's no wrong answer, except there actually is, but it's okay.
I think some people are humming to themselves in their head the Jeopardy theme song.
Right.
Okay, I'm going to give it another few seconds.
Make your voice count.
Okay, I'm closing the poll. Let's see. It is tied between clothing and dining out, with home maintenance coming in a distant third. Nobody said car payment.
Nice. Well, again, we had a very good outcome here. The answer is, drum roll please, it's actually clothing, which to me was actually very surprising when I was preparing for the session, because I actually thought internally, and that, this is my preconceived notion, because this is what I would, do, would be dining out. So I would have been with that crowd. But I want to let you know that 67% of credit cards actually buy clothing with their credit. 64% use their cards to buy gas, 64% use their credit cards to buy food, and 62% use their cards to pay travel expenses. And associated with this poll, I want to actually also tell you that this is also a piece of information which was also very surprising, but really refreshing to me, that among credit card holders surveyed, those age 50 and up were actually more likely than those age 18 to 49 to use their credit cards for a variety of different things, including travel, clothing, home maintenance, and car maintenance. And yeah, I mean, make with that information what you may, but I definitely think that there's hope in that. Maybe we are definitely, trying to get more involved with all of the efforts that are going on more recently on really lowering our debt and being more conscious of how much debt we get into. So there you go. So now let's talk about credit scores. Who reports on it? Well, there's three reporting agencies, and these are Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax. And they independently give us a credit score, and then typically when you go to a lender to get your credit, they will run all three reports and give you typically the one that's in the middle. But what does this credit score actually mean? It means how risky really are you? Where do you really fall on the spectrum of how much we should give you, at what terms we should give you that amount, that loan amount. But I would like for you to take away from this that these are companies that are reporting your information. However, it is very, very important for us to be able to check on this information on a timely basis and consistently, because it is very, very common for these companies to report erroneous information. And also it's very common these days for things like identity theft, people that get your information and run off a credit report or go to Vegas. It's happened to me before. I have actually personally never been to Vegas, but my credit card has. And had I not actually paid attention to what was being charged and what was going on, it would have definitely been something that I would have paid for. I have plenty of friends actually that pay their balances on a monthly basis but do not reconcile, hey, what's in there, what's going on. I also have experienced merchants double charging on a payment. I'm sure most of you can also think of different times that you've been charged either double or you've maybe been charged the wrong thing. So it's very important for us to keep tabs on what's going on and really keep our finger on the pulse of our credit report. Now, how do creditors actually decide to grant credit? I want to talk to you about the 3 C's of credit. Number 1 is capacity. We have character, and we have collateral. What does this mean? Well, capacity is how much debt can a borrower really handle, considering the income streams that they have and the legal obligations which might obstruct that debt repayment. So really, they want to know, and there's no really, 100% formula for this, but they, do their thing in engaging what is it that you can actually afford. What do they feel comfortable in saying, you know what, she really does can afford this type of amount. And then in terms of character, they take into consideration how has this borrower previously handled debt repayment, including overdue or suspended payments, repossessions, etc. What has happened with the last times that you have borrowed money. And collateral, which basically means what does this person have in savings, what type of assets do they own, that they can actually collect from you in the event that you don't pay your loan. And then how do creditors really determine that credit worthiness? Where you first fill out a credit application, a credit report is given, and that credit score is calculated. Keep in mind that you are actually the one that fills out that credit application. And that credit application includes identifying personal information that will give borrowers the opportunity to run the credit report. They will then analyze the information. They will have that credit score available to them. All right, so then these are some debt management ratios that we should keep in mind. These are, I want to remind you, some general guidelines, and these general guidelines are just that, they're general. So while you might be able to handle more debt comfortably than these ratios actually say, I want you to keep in mind that creditors do take these percentages into consideration. So we should definitely, as borrowers, take them into consideration, serious consideration as well. And needless to say, that of course staying below these percentages is definitely, ultimately the best thing. Keeping in mind, of course, and towards the bottom of the slide you will see that housing expenses for that middle portion includes debt repayment, that mortgage payment, that principal, includes interest, includes taxes, and insurance. So that 28% that you see there or less of gross monthly income in housing expenses includes all of those things. Now, there is some flexibility on these numbers because we do realize, of course, people live in different areas, and typically where you live dictates a lot of what is acceptable in terms of living expenses, transportation costs, and things of that nature. Basic, daily living costs a lot more in New York City versus, I would say, maybe rural Alabama. But, considering all of those things, we still would like to get some type of general guideline that we could sort of gauge ourselves and our success by. So consumer debt, definitely try to keep it below that 20% or less of that net monthly income. And of course, total debt below 36% or less of your monthly income as well. And this is actually the last question that I have for you guys in terms of the poll. And I want to know from you, do you currently keep a detailed record of all your creditors, your debt balances, and the terms of credit?
Okay, the poll is open. I would love to see 100% on this one, folks. So, and don't worry, we're not seeing your name as to who voted what. All right, we're at 56%, 67, 78. We're getting up there. Give you another few seconds. We're at 89%. We can do another 11%. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. And the results are, Anya, 75% do not keep a detailed record, 25% do.
Yes, okay. While definitely it's a staggering number, It's not surprising to me, and I want to tell you why. A lot of people don't actually want to look at this big number in the face because it's very overwhelming. And I got good news for you. You're definitely not alone, but there's no time like the present to start trying to make sure you get a good grasp on what it is you owe and figuring out what strategy can you take to strive and attack this debt. It's definitely doable. As I told you at the beginning of this session, I speak to this from a place of personal experience, and I could definitely put my hand to the fire on what I am going to tell you next, because these are things that I did myself. And these are definitely things that I had to be involved in between a rock and a hard place on, and you know, and once you're on the other side, you're like, yeah, definitely, this is worth it 100%. So where do you even begin? Where do you even begin on this? Well, it is very, very important to find out information on what you actually owe, who you owe, what is the amount that you owe, and what are the fees, the interest rates, the different terms and conditions that you agreed and signed to when you embarked on that journey. Once you do that, you can start a debt management plan. And in your resources, I included a handout that, oh, by the way, the actual presentation as a whole is also included in your handouts. So if you do want to download, take some notes, of course, definitely feel free to do that as well. But in those handouts as well, you will see that there is this template that is showing up in your screen right now, which of course you can modify and personalize to fit your particular needs, but it'll give you a general sense of what you need to do in terms of getting started and getting organized around starting to pay your debt. It's definitely not something, yeah.
Anya, I'm sorry, let me just interrupt briefly. For attendees, please note in your control panel, there is a box named Handouts, and that's where you will see the links to the two handouts. If you only see the word Handouts, there's a little arrow next to it that you click, and that'll show you the full box. And all you have to do is click on the link, and it'll download to your computer, and those downloads are safe. Thank you.
Okay. So once you have that information, you can actually gauge, you know what, is my debt too high? Now that I've identified, you know, what I actually owe, I need to go ahead and identify potential things that I could do to combat it. So number one, you need to say, okay, do I go ahead and start trying to get more income, something that can supplement what I currently have, that will allow me to take larger bites out of this, you know, big elephant quicker? Or do I need to go ahead and make sure that I dig down and cut spending? The second portion is sometimes a lot easier to do than the first. And, you know, while it might take us a little bit longer to get used to the idea of maybe a second job or some part-time options, we can definitely make an impact by taking a look at where we're actually spending our money and cutting down on it. Keep in mind, I think that you will be very, very surprised when you look at what it is you're spending your money on, because there are sometimes some very, very, very small and seemingly insignificant charges that we make that are so relevant to the total of our charge, and we can definitely make a difference in just being more disciplined in our spending. Now, that's definitely not to say that I do know that a lot of us have acquired a lot of debt based on many different things that don't involve just managing your debt not in a wise manner. Things that include, for example, healthcare costs, things that include, you know, charging daily living expenses due to unemployment, things of that nature. So you know, be easy on yourself as well, and knowing that, hey, you know, I've done what I've done, I've gotten to where I've gotten, and now this is where I'm going to make a turn and make my situation better. However, definitely don't beat yourself up for the things that have happened previously. What's done is done. But definitely be creative, stay disciplined, and in the end, do not get discouraged. Let's get into it step by step. I spoke to you at the beginning that we were going to do something that was very practical in terms of actually, you know, getting our debt under control. Number one, once you get that whole list of who you owe, how much you owe, what the interest rate is, what those minimum payments are, you put that all into a sheet, and then you know what you're working with. It's, you know, it's the first step in really understanding what you're going to strategize to get in front of this beast, if you call it. Step number two is to actually go ahead and reorganize this debt according to what you think would be the most effective way of tackling it. One option would be to reorganize it from largest interest rate to lowest. And you will see that this example that I put on the slide is actually doing it in that same nature. And I definitely have to tell you that this way will give you the best results in terms of saving money. Because remember when I mentioned at the beginning that these debt also works with that compounding interest. And so if you go ahead and you pay the debt that has the most interest at the beginning, you will end up saving the most amount of money. However, sometimes we just need a little push. And when we see progress and we see, you know, things falling off that list, we get more encouraged to keep on going. So in that sense, it may work best for you to start with the lowest amount due to the highest, because then you will be able to see relatively quickly things just falling off the list, and it will keep you motivated and it will push you to move forward quicker. And then step number three is to actually go ahead and do it. It's very, very important to, you know, you've drawn out the plan, you've analyzed the situation, you're looking at the problem in the face. Now it's important to actually take action. The key to success, definitely don't build more credit while you're paying off these old credits that you've acquired. And, you know, get yourself on a controlled budget. It's definitely very, very important to get yourself on that controlled budget. Keep yourself strong. Stay up to date with every single one of this information, and keep your eyes on the prize. You can definitely do it. You can definitely do it, and it will definitely be worth it. And in the end, I would like to share with you one final Bible verse, and it's, "Let no debt remain outstanding, except the continued debt to love one another, for whoever loves others has fulfilled the law." And Sandy, I know that you mentioned you wanted me to start questions at 9:30, 9:45. I've done my deed.
Once again, very, very punctual. Thank you. Thank you, Anya, so much for your presentation. You've given me a lot to think about, and I'm sure you have given our attendees a lot to think about, and I'm sure there's questions out there. So again, just to recap, for attendees, you can ask questions in one of two ways. You can either type them into the question box, and I will keep an eye on that, and then I will ask them of Anya on your behalf. Or you can raise your hand. Just click on your little raised hand icon, and when I see that come up, I will invite you to speak. You will automatically become unmuted. Emily, you do have your hand raised. I'm not sure if that's intentional or not, so double check that. If it is intentional, just leave it up there for a little bit, and I will call on you in a minute. Oh, it's gone. Okay.
Emily, don't leave. No.
While people are formulating their questions, one of the things you made, I just listened to a podcast a short time ago, a few days ago, where I don't remember the exact quote, but the person said, using a credit card is like stealing from yourself. And I found that a really interesting quote. So if you want to reflect on that for a little bit while we take some questions here. Okay, Chanel asks how we get in touch with Anya, and I believe, Anya, you have your contact information coming up, correct? Yes.
That's right. I just put it up here on this final slide. You will see the contact information for me towards the bottom of this slide, and of course the main office information for MMBB Financial Services up top. You can reach me on my cell, that's my work cell phone number, of course, directly, or over email. And I would be happy to speak with you.
Okay, thank you, Anya.
Sure thing.
I'll ask another question for you. I know we have some folks on this call who are young adults, and we also have some folks who might be mothers or grandmothers of young adults. My daughter is a young adult, just recently graduated from college, and she knows it's important for her to establish a good credit score, but she's having problems getting a line of credit because she has no credit history. What would you advise as a good way for somebody who's just starting out to establish a solid line of credit without getting themselves into all sorts of debt trouble?
Yes. I would definitely advise making sure that there is a good spending plan established before she actually opens up the line of credit. So it might be a blessing in disguise that she's having trouble finding somebody to give her credit right now. This is the perfect time to be disciplined with a good budget that will allow her to keep good control of her finances before she embarks on that idea that, hey, this is a magical card that I could just swipe and then all of a sudden I have, these things that are so great. Sometimes as young adults, especially straight out of college, and even sometimes, these credit cards go into colleges and recruit internally in colleges for young folks to sign up for credit because typically college kids are so broke. So it's a lot easier for them to go ahead and continue to charge, and then they've acquired all of this debt and all of this additional revenue for the credit card companies who can collect from them interest. So in order to combat that idea of getting that credit out of control, definitely making sure that she has established a good spending plan, making sure that that budget is sound and in place, and hopefully maybe even she has been guiding herself with that budget for a few months before she goes into the credit card. That would be the best. And then, of course, once you get the credit card, if you are being disciplined with it, go ahead and charge, those things that you're going to need regardless, and then pay it off monthly. In the end, you are going to continue building that credit, and you are going to not pay for those interest charges. Staying with below a limit, by the way. I didn't mention this earlier, but if you are using cards, staying below 50% of the credit that you're given on those cards. So for example, if your limit is $2,000, staying below $1,000 is typically best practice. So staying below that 50%, it will allow you to build that credit, but pay it off monthly, get those perks, get those advantages, but don't pay for it.
Okay, thank you. We've got two questions coming in. I'm going to take Sharice's first because she put one in the question box a little while ago, and then I'll take Sharon. Sharice is asking, what does MMBB do? Work with individuals for debt reduction or planning? Basically, what are the main functions of MMBB?
MMBB is a financial services company or ministry, I should say. And so we do offer an out. You know what, Cindy, if I may, I'm going to actually go back to our original slide here where I discussed our vision, and it's, you know, it's here for everybody to see. MMBB Financial Services, the premier Christian financial services ministry for the free church community, providing comprehensive financial solutions for its members and their families to and through their retirement journey. So it definitely, we work with folks also with financial planning and making sure that your goals are in place and you're working towards achieving them. There's definitely different plans available to church leaders, people that are employed by the different churches.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, Sharon, I am going to unmute you for you to ask your question. I'm sorry, you're self-muted. You have to unmute yourself. There you go. You're unmuted now, Sharon. Okay, Sharon, we're not hearing you, so if you would rather type your question into the question box, that way we'll make sure we get it. And meanwhile, while Sharon's doing that, does anybody else have a question? Okay, it's possible we might have lost Sharon altogether. Oh, no, here she comes back. Any other questions? Anya, I'm sure since you have given your contact information, if people have additional questions, does that mean you would be willing to respond to them by email or phone after this webinar is over?
Definitely.
Okay.
If you have an individual question that you'd rather not share with the group, I mean, all of us would be able to benefit from any of the questions, but definitely feel free to reach out to me if you'd like to speak to me individually.
Thank you. And also a reminder to all attendees, do check out that handouts box where you can download the PDF version of this presentation, and that does include Anya's contact information on the last slide, so you would have it in print there, and also the very handy chart to fill out. Here we go, Sharon's question. Oh, this is going to be a tricky one, Anya. I can't wait to hear how you answer this one.
Oh, great. I can't wait to hear it.
What if your spouse has different spending habits than you?
That is so unlikely that, you know, it's really not a good question. No, I'm just kidding. It's definitely something that happens so often because we are so different in nature. And, you know, that also, Sharon, I can speak from a place of experience myself because, of course, we have very, very different styles in what we consider to be good spending and bad spending, or even necessary things or trivial things. So what do you actually do is get together. In my experience, or in my own personal life, we actually come together once a month and we kind of gauge, okay, where are we? And the first meeting should look like putting your goals together in a basket, basically. So you come with your ideas, and your spouse comes with theirs. And so you come together, and this will give you an opportunity to, one, be on the same page. Just make sure that everybody knows where everybody's standing. And number two, it'll also give you the opportunity to put some priorities in order. So maybe you're willing to, to actually compromise on some points, and maybe your spouse is willing to compromise on some points, and so you're able to say, okay, this is first, this is second, this is third, and then you attack those goals and those aspirations as you move forward, leading yourself with that spending plan. On a day-to-day basis, however, when you're looking at, just, mundane spending habits, I would say definitely stick to a good amount that you are that you give yourself free reign with. For example, I'll give you in my own life, my husband and I used to say, we get a certain amount of money. You get this, let's call it, for example, $100. So he has $100, I have $100, and therefore, if I want to go get my nails done once a week for every week of the month, I can go ahead and do that, because that is the area where it's budgeted that I have that amount of money to do what I please. That's not to say that if I go and I buy a pair of shoes, guess what? 2 of the weeks of the nails will have to be kind of put to the side. And same for him. If he spends all of that amount during the beginning of the month, then you have to reconsider what's going on at the end. So that will give you sort of some peace in mind of, what, we are incorporating this certain amount into a budget, but there's also some type of free reign as to what can be done individually according to the different preferences that there exists. And it's definitely good that we think differently. We contribute different things to the relationship, and we shouldn't assume that all of us think the same about everything all the time. It keeps things interesting, Sharon. I've definitely learned that.
Thank you for the wonderful question. I am trying to put into the chat room, I'm hoping you can all see these, links to a couple of books that might be helpful for addressing issues such as that. These are books that I ran across doing some research for something a little while ago. The first one is Mind Over Money, Overcoming the Money Disorders That Threaten Our Financial Health. And I believe the link I put in there is Kindle edition. And it's mostly talking about your own money issues, but there is some information in there is about how to talk about things with a spouse. And it's particularly interesting because we all tend to come at financial discussions feeling like it's just about money, when the reality is it's about a whole lot else. There's a lot going on there. There's our childhoods and our parents' attitudes towards money and everything that comes into play. So that's a good book to look at. And the other one I'm trying to find in my history, I'm sorry, it'll come up in a minute. We have a couple of other comments. Chanel has said, thank you for this webinar. Sharon did say, great suggestions. Thank you so much. Do we have any other questions? We still have a couple of minutes.
Well, definitely you're welcome to the person that said thank you for the webinar. And I'm so happy that, Sharon, that these suggestions potentially can help you. It definitely has helped me.
Okay, any other questions? Sharon wants to know if you offer retirement planning.
Yes. Sharon,
that was a fast answer.
Yes, definitely. Planning towards retirement, through retirement, different financial plannings, of financial planning according to what your needs are and your particular situation is. If Sharon, all I know is your first name, but I would be definitely very interested to speak with you. Please feel free to reach out to me, send me a quick email, and we could set some time to speak.
I will also just put in the call as a mother of young adults. Young adulthood is not too early to start planning for retirement.
That's right.
Especially in today's financial world.
That's correct.
Okay, do we have other questions? Other comments? All right, then Anya, do you have any last words of wisdom that you would like to share with the group just to cap everything off?
Yes. I don't know of wisdom, but I do have final words. I want to encourage everyone to move forward. You know, whatever way you absolutely you can, in whatever step that you can take, whatever that first step looks like, make it. Do it. That is the only way to get started. I've heard in the past, and I'm sure all of you know, what's the best way to eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And sometimes it may really seem like we are trying to eat an elephant when we look at the type of debt that we have been able to accumulate over the years. But don't get discouraged. Keep your head up and continue to plow forward, because you can definitely do this. Don't get discouraged. And lastly, I just want to say thank you so much for the opportunity that you've given me to speak to all of you. I've enjoyed this so very much. I hope that my excitement on this topic has been able to be transferred through the phone here, through this audio call. And I really do hope I get the opportunity to maybe in the future speak to you all individually on this topic or on anything else. So definitely feel free to use that contact information to reach me at your convenience for whatever you may like.
Thank you so much, Anya. And Sharon actually just left another comment that segues nicely into what I was going to say. Thank you so much, Sharon. Sharon says we should do this quarterly. It is so needed. And I will say two things to that. First is that our churches, most of our congregations, I think, only tend to talk to people about financial issues when it comes time for the pledge drives for our times of taking offerings, etc. When particularly in our women's ministries groups and our youth groups, this is, like you said, Sharon, this is so needed, and to be able to put it into context of our faith. That's why AB Women's Ministries, and particularly the ideas for these webinars, came out of our Young Adult Women's Ministry Advisory Team. They identified this as a real need for Christian women. And so I would encourage all of you who have participated in this webinar and those who might be watching this as a recording afterwards to really pray about doing something like this or sponsoring something like this in your congregation, in your women's ministries, with your youth. Like Anya pointed out, credit card companies hit those college campuses hard, so let's educate our kids before they go away. So the second thing I would say to that, Sharon, thank you for your segue, is everybody will be getting an email with a link to the recording of the webinar and an evaluation form. Please fill out that evaluation form, particularly where we do ask for suggestions for future such events. We take those very seriously, and in fact, this webinar specifically came out of suggestions that were made off of the first one that we did. So thank you very much for your participation. Do be sure to fill out that evaluation form when you get it, and share the word. The recording of this webinar will be available for free to watch. And you'll get the link for that as well. Spread the word, let people know, and be in touch with Anya with your questions later. Thank you again so much, Anya. It was a joy and a pleasure to work with you here. I appreciate all the time and energy you put into tonight's presentation.
Thank you so much, Sandy.
Okay, we will now end the webinar. Thank you so much again for participating, everybody. Good night.
Good night.